Thanks, Brittany. Let me just steal presentation rights. And good day, everybody. My name is Ed Gutkowski. I'm the Chief Architect of the RapidReconciler product at GSI. And today we are going to be talking about distribution manufacturing automatic accounting instructions. Okay, so let me get this thing to work. Some of the topics that we will be covering, and it does not seem as though my screen is advancing. Just bear with me 1 second. Brittany, what do you see on my screen right now?
It is still your picture.
Still on my picture?
Yep.
Okay. Let me see if I can stop and restart this. Because for some reason, it is not advancing. This is very interesting.
Would you like me to show my screen?
Please, if we could do that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Let's just switch over. I don't know why this is not working. Okay, and if you can just show the presentation and advance it, I'll just let you know when to advance it, okay? Okay, perfect. So some of the topics that we're going to be covering today is we'll talk a little bit about how those distribution manufacturing accounting instructions will work. And page down. And we'll talk about what they look like in JD Edwards and how they appear on the setup screen. We'll talk about the use of those wildcards, the company 00000 or the 4 asterisks that are used for geo class codes. We'll talk a little bit about what tables they are, the description and programs that call them. We'll talk a little bit about line types, and then those come into play on purchase orders and sales orders. And then we'll have a couple of little useful tips and tricks at the end. Okay, so first, let's talk about how DMAAIs work. So what they are is they are a function of an inventory transaction. So we have 2 sides of the coin. We have inventory transactions that are being conducted either in the warehouse or out in the factory. We need to create a general ledger transaction for every single inventory transaction that happens. This is how we keep track of what how much value is being held on the financial statements with regards to inventory. In the distribution manufacturing automatic accounting instructions, that is the roadmap that JD Edwards uses to book or create those GL entries for inventory related transactions. So that is the definition of what a DMAAI is. A more specific example of that, and go ahead and page down. We'll talk about an inventory adjustment. And the way that that works is, I'm assuming that most folks are familiar with the inventory adjustment. It is programmed behind the scene, it's program P4114. So when you go onto your menu and you select that option that says create an inventory adjustment, behind the scenes, it's calling program P4114. In the confines of that program, it knows what DMAAI tables to go call in order to figure out the mapping for the GL entry. So it's going to use, in this particular case, table 4122, 4124 to do the double-sided entry that is required on the GL. So 4122 would represent the balance sheet part, 4124 would represent the expense account. So if we were to do an adjustment for $100, we would need to debit our inventory account $100 and credit some type of expense. So all the different transactions have different program numbers. They call 2 or more DMAAI tables. The lookup is done depending on the item or items that are being transacted, in what company, what particular document type is being used, and what the GL class code is of the item being transacted. So all that put together, I do an inventory transaction, it looks up the mappings in the automatic accounting instructions, and the journal entries are automatically created behind the scenes. Okay, can we advance? Okay, so the setup screens, what do they look like? If you have authority in JD Edwards, if you have FastPath, you can just type the command DMAAI. The data is stored in table F4095 for those who are more technical in nature and may want to write reports and extract the data. The setup screen, the work with AAI screen, you can see it. It will default, I believe, to 4122, but you can see in the detail listing all the different AAI tables. That certainly is not all of them. You see a few for inventory, but there are several dozen DMAAI tables that need to be configured. Now, if I were to select an individual table, let's say 4122, then I would drill in and I would see the discrete entries. So in the example that I'm showing here, you'll see there are some company 0 entries. The very first row, it'll have company 0 IA, geo category code IN30. Then you would specify a branch plant object and subsidiary. So if I were to do an adjustment for any item who has a GL class code of IN30, the inventory account that would be debited would be 1.1411. Okay, so the lookup key for a DMAAI is company number, document type, geo class code. And right above that, it says the accounts are not validated. Okay, which means that when you configure this, you can basically type in whatever you want. Okay, whether the account works or not, it will not validate on this screen. If you were to type in, let's say on that first row, instead of branch plant 1, let's say you typed in branch plant ABC, and there is no such branch as ABC. Will JD Edwards let you type that in there, and will it accept that value? The answer is yes, it will accept it. However, if you try to do an inventory adjustment with that value in there, the transaction on the screen will error and say invalid account. Okay, so there are reasons why it doesn't validate at this point, flex accounting being one of them. Okay, I can also leave the branch plant blank and it will default from the business unit. There are different rules behind the scenes as to why they don't validate, but I just wanted to let you know that that is the case. They are not validated during the entry process. Okay, next. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the use of these, I call them wildcards, and that's the company 00000 and the 4 asterisks. Okay, so there is a hierarchy and a set of lookup rules that will kick in whenever those are found in a DMAAI table. So if we go through an example, and let's just say we have company 100, and the item has a geo class of IN20. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to go into the DMAAI table and it's going to look for a specific entry. So it'll say, can I find one that says company 100 in geo class IN20? Okay. If it finds that, it will use it. If it cannot find that exact match, it will go in and say, do I have a geo class of all asterisks for a specific company 100? Okay. If it does, it will use that one. If it can't find that, it will go to the specific geo class code and say, do I have a company 0 entry for IN20? If it does, I will use that. And then finally, if it can't find that, it will look for both values being wildcards, and we'll use that one. And if it can't even find that, then you're going to get an error message, okay? And say, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to create the general ledger entry, so now your transaction will error. So wildcards, company 00000 is a company wildcard. The 4 asterisks can be used for a GL class code wildcard. The object account, when you set that up, can never be a wildcard. That has to be populated. It cannot be blank. and it has to be a valid object account. Okay, so that's how the wildcards work. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to pose our first poll question, and here's an example. And I'll launch this in a second. Okay, if we have an inventory adjustment and we're doing an IA, the company number is going to be company 1, and the item GL class is going to be IN20. So based on the hierarchy that we just reviewed in the previous section, which DMAAI will be used, which one will be invoked. Okay, so let me go ahead and launch that. And so now on your screen, you should be seeing the poll question, and I'll just give it a few minutes. To go. Yep, the responses are coming in. Okay, just another minute or so. Okay, that's it. I will close that. And so we do have a heavily suggested company 1 geo class asterisk. So Brittany, if you'd be so kind as to advance, let's see what the answer actually is. And there we go. It's number 3, company 1. The majority of you got that one correct. Okay, so that's good. You were actually paying attention. So with that, we use company 1, geo class IN20. So if we remember the hierarchy, do we find an exact match? And the answer is no, we do not. So if we don't find an exact match, the next thing we do is we go to geo class of the 4 asterisks and an exact match on the company, which is what answer number 3 is. So good job, folks. Okay, let's advance down. Okay, the next 3 slides that we're going to look at all look like this, and they look very busy. The intent of these is not to go through each one of these in painstaking detail, but if you were to request a copy of the slides, you can use these next 3 slides as reference material. This is very, very good reference material. So what this is the inventory system, and notice the 41 in parentheses. One thing about J.D. Edwards, and I like to just kind of throw that out there as general knowledge, J.D. Edwards has always been very good about labeling their subsystems. Like, for example, inventory is subsystem 41, the general ledger is 09, accounts receivable is 03, so on and so forth. All of these subsystems have numbers to them, okay? Now, when you look at things technically in J.D. Edwards, like if you were to go to the main menu and use their FastPath commands, like G41 would be the main menu for inventory. So that's where the 41 kicks in. Notice the program ID column on this chart. They all start with P41. So you know that those are inventory programs. Look at the DMAAI table numbers, 4122, 4124. This is not done by accident. Okay, this is all intentional. So it's good to know what those system codes are. So whenever you see something like, if somebody's talking to you and you say, oh, run this report, R41543, you may not know exactly what it is, but you know it's an inventory report because it starts with R41. Okay, so I always like to share that bit of information. Now, how this slide works is, if I look at the groupings, I see group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. Okay, group 1 means those are the DMAAIs for those particular transaction types. So for example, the first line in group 1, the P4112, is an inventory issue. So if I run an inventory issue program, it is P4112. The standard document type that J.D. Edwards likes to use is the II, and it will call 4122, 4124, 4126, 4128, and for if you're doing a transfer, you will also invoke 4141. So there are more than one DMAAI tables. They're usually called in pairs. Okay, so you can see, and then to the right of that, each one of those tables is a definition as to what that table does. So 4122, it says an inventory that provides the balance sheet valuation account. Okay, so the 4124, the expense side, is an inventory DMAAI that's for the expense or cost of goods sold. Okay, so 4126, 4128 have to do with zero balance adjustments. Okay, so if we invoke a zero balance adjustment, those DMAAIs will be called, right? So on and so forth. So the group, right, those group of transactions or those group of programs call those DMAAIs. So those have to be set up in order for those transactions to work. So you kind of get the gist here. So the group 1 transactions, the group 2 have to do with quantity revisions, what comes into play, what generates an IB transaction, right? So if I do a cost change, right, I have to book the value of that change. And those DMAAIs, you'll see the table numbers that come into play. And group 3 and group 4 as well. So all of these have to do with the inventory system 41. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Okay, same type of information, but this has to do with the purchasing system. Purchasing is system code number 43. Okay, so you can see everything starts with a 43 here, right? So the main transaction, the inventory transaction in the purchasing system is a purchase order receipt. So I can do a receipt. You can see all the different DMAAIs that can be invoked. And yes, I can just hear it now. If you guys are able to answer a question now, you would say, oh, I see some DMAAIs that start with 44, not 43. I thought you said everything would start with 43. Okay, it's the 99% rule. It's not 100%, but it's close. I guess they must have run out of numbers. Okay, but that is the gist of what those system codes are. So you can see we have purchase receipts, we have voucher matches, okay? And we also have some things for taxes. So the bottom group, group 3, has to do with taxes and landed costs. Right? So there's a lot of activity that goes on whenever you do an inventory transaction, a lot more than what it seems like on the surface. Okay, purchasing 43. If we go to the next one, you'll see the same thing for the sales order system. So the sales order system is 42. So I do a ship confirm. I need to book a sales order. So I need to record my inventory. I need to record revenue. I need to record cost of goods sold, so on and so forth. If I have special price adjustments, all of those things need to be accounted for. Okay, so that, again, that gives you a list. That's the reference list. And then finally, the last module that impacts inventory will be manufacturing. That'll be on the next page. And you can see the 3132 for manufacturing. So we have manufacturing accounting that runs. That's what creates all the entries and where the DMAAIs get invoked. So you'll see that listing, and as well as variance accounting. So if your organization does work order processing, then these processes kick into play, and those DMAAIs will need to be populated as well. Okay, can we go to the next page? All right, so poll question number 2. Let's see if you were paying attention. That says, which system code is represented by the number 42? So let me launch that, and we'll take a minute and see what happens here. So, oh, it sure looks like people have been paying attention. Okay, we'll give it another few seconds here. People are doing very well. Okay, another 15 seconds. Let's close it up. I think if I do this webinar again, I'm going to have to change up this question because apparently it was way too easy. So if you would, Brittany, let's reveal the answer. And the answer, of course, is the sales order system. That was number 42. Everybody who answered got that one correct. So we had 100% of our responses selected option number 2, which is outstanding. Okay. Okay, so let's move forward with that. All right, and we'll talk a little bit about line types now. So where line types come into play is on sales orders and purchase orders. So work orders do not have quote unquote line types associated with them. They're a different animal. So, and if you want to advance, the inventory interface column in the line type definition is what drives the interface to the DMAAIs and what GL class code is used during that lookup. Okay, so don't forget, when we're talking about DMAAIs now, we are talking about, we go into a table, the program calls the table, and it looks it up by company number, GL class code, and document type. And that's how it finds the account numbers. Okay, so when we're doing a ship confirm, or we're doing sales update, I should say, on the sales order side, or if we're doing a purchase order receipt, and there's a line type on those orders of, let's just say, A for asset movement, and we look in the details and it says, oh, the inventory interface is Y. Well, if it's a Y, that means this is an actual inventory item. I'm going to look it up to see what the location is for that item that's being transacted. And for the Y, it's going to go get it from the location. Okay. If we're using a line type where the inventory interface is set to N, like say on our screen here, let's just say we were using BF for freight. Okay. And the line type is N, where it's going to get the GL class code now is it's going to get it from the GL offset column that you see highlighted on the right. So if it was BF, it doesn't matter. It's going to use code FT60 to do the lookup to actually create the journal entries. Okay, so that's a little bit different. So like if I'm doing an inventory adjustment and I'm adjusting inventory into a primary location, it goes to the location to get the GL class code to determine what accounts to use. That way, if we have inventory that's set up as raw material, as a subassembly, as finished goods, it knows based on its GL class code which account needs to be debited or credited. So that's the way the inventory works. When we get into sales orders or purchase orders, however, there's another level of complication. Okay, so now you need to understand about the inventory interface, whether it's yes or no, and which codes derive or drive where that GL class code comes from. So that's why this table is here. Okay, so let's move to the next slide and we will do our last poll question. And so if I have a purchase order and that line has an inventory interface that's set to N, where does the GL class code come from? So let me launch that poll. And you can see the 5 options that are here. So does it come from the location, master, PO line, line type setup, none of the above? Okay, so let's see what we have here. So this one is spread out. So this one's not quite as clear, and that's as expected. This is kind of complicated. If you don't have much experience in JD Edwards with DMAAIs, this one will definitely confuse you the most. Okay, now we'll just give it about another 8 seconds here, and I will close this. Okay, there we go. All right, so the vast majority of you selected the line type setup, and you would be correct. The second most was actually the purchase order line, which I might give you a pass on that one, because that one's a close second. Okay, it will come from the line type setup because it's set to N, but I would totally understand if people would say the purchase order line, because it kind of sort of in effect it does, because the line type is on the PO line and that calls the line type setup. So I would give you credit for that. So the overwhelming majority of you guys got this one as well. I really do need to make harder questions. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of tips. So some things that I've learned over the years. Okay, and I really love this chart. Now, I would love to take claim to actually being the author of this, but yet I am not. I, let's say, borrowed it from a friend of mine who had put this together years and years ago. And I just kind of liked it because it's a simple look. It tells you a lot of information in kind of one simple picture. So if we look at this and we say, we can see the four divisions here, the manufacturing, inventory, sales, and purchasing. Those are the four main modules that comprise inventory, or that impact inventory. So we can see the manufacturing, the system code 3132. We can see the inventory 41, sales 42, purchasing 43. Although these are not all the DMAAI tables for each of these modules, they do represent the vast majority of them, and certainly the ones that are used most frequently. Okay, so where you see the X's is where you would expect those transaction types to be configured, right? So let's just say manufacturing, for example, we have the IC and it says, oh, the IC should be set up in 3130. Okay, which is true. That's a work order completion. It should be set up in 3130. It should not be set up in 3110. The material issued document goes there, right? So a lot of times if I go in and I'm doing an analysis on somebody's DMAAIs, and I look in manufacturing, and I look in the table and I see IBs in there, I start scratching my head and go, why would anybody set up an IB in the manufacturing tables? It doesn't make any sense. All right, so that's one thing that you can glean from this chart, is it kind of gives you an idea of which transaction types should be set up where, right? And conversely, where some things just may not make sense, right? I certainly wouldn't want to be setting up purchase order receipts in the manufacturing DMAIs. It doesn't really make much sense, okay? Now, with that said, let's talk about this whole concept of a model table. Now, a model table, and the one that I like to use is the one that's highlighted in green there. It's 4152, and it cross sections with the PI document type. It's for physical inventory. So what that means is, if you were to look in JD Edwards, if you had fast path access to the DMAIs, and you were to do an inquiry on table 4152, and you filtered to document type PI, what you would see, or what you should see, is a list of all the different geo class codes that are used in your inventory system by company, with their corresponding business unit, object, and subsidiary pieces of the account number, right? So let's just take that one particular table and vet it out and say, yes, this one is perfectly accurate. So all my raw materials, geo class codes point to the raw material accounts, sub-assemblies, finished goods, however you break down your inventory. My setup in the 4152 PI is perfect. Okay. With that said, now, all the other table numbers that you see along the right, in the right column, that have the green boxes around them, the setup should look, if not exact, 98% identical, because those are all inventory side of the transaction. These are not expense DMAIs. These are balance sheet. So you'll see even in the description where it says 4122 debit credit to B/S, that means balance sheet. So all the balance sheet side should look the same as 4152, right? Because all they do is they represent different transaction types. So for example, if I have a raw material and I adjust it in with an IA, it's going to use 4122. And 4122 for that geo class code should say raw material account. Well, what happens now if I sell that raw material and I put it on a sales order and I need to credit the inventory account? Should I not be crediting the raw materials account? Of course I should. I'm selling a raw material. The value of that inventory sits in the raw material account. So if I sell it, I need to credit raw material, not finished goods. Just because an item is on a sales order does not mean the credit goes to finished goods. It is going to depend on the geo class of the item. So this whole model table concept is, let's get one DMAAI table for the balance sheet to be accurate, and then let's turn around and compare all of the different DMAAIs that you see in green here, and they should look the same. If they don't look the same, we need to question why. Okay, we need to make sure. Another thing that I know based on years of looking at inventory is when you go to reconcile, the biggest contributor to reconciling items are setup issues within your automatic accounting instructions. That is number one root cause. So understanding what these DMAAIs are, how they work, and using some of these tips to make sure that they're configured correctly will save you so much grief going forward. All right, so it is important to understand that. Okay, next, please. Okay, now debugging errors. If you're doing that inventory adjustment and you're on the screen, so this is an interactive transaction, I'm keying in this adjustment, and there is a problem in the DMAAI table, like I typed in that branch plan ABC that doesn't exist. This is what the error code looks like. It's a real-time error that occurs right on the adjustment screen. And if you look in the text, it will even tell you. It says distribution AAI number 4122 invalid. Okay, so check for company one, type IA, geo class IN99. So it's even telling you what it's doing. Okay, but the account number that's in there is not valid. I cannot make an entry to that account. All right, so the DMAAI needs to be corrected. So these error messages appear right on the screen. It will not let you process the transaction until it knows how to do the journal entry. Okay, so this is called an interactive transaction. I'm doing it on the screen, it fails immediately. So you'll see this with an inventory adjustment. You'll see it with an inventory issue, an inventory transfer, a purchase order receipt. These errors will appear right on the screen as you're doing them. Okay, not all transactions will do this. And if we move to the next slide, okay, now we're going to talk about batch errors. Now, when we talk about work orders and we talk about sales orders, okay, these are not interactive programs. I don't create journal entries as I do the transactions. So if I am issuing material to a work order, if I'm completing a work order, I'm doing ship confirms on the sales order, I can be doing that stuff all day long. Okay? The GL has absolutely no idea that these transactions are occurring until I run these batch programs during the night. So for work orders, it's the manufacturing accounting program. For sales orders, it's the sales update program. If there are problems with DMAAIs, okay, they will come out on an exception report. So an example of the manufacturing accounting exception report you can see now, right? So you see the report number, R31802A, right? R31, we know 31 is manufacturing, right? So it will tell you, here's your AAI number, 3120, that's work in process. Geo category, G08, the cost type XB, they are not configured. So it does not know how to create these entries. So now we're going to get an error, and this work order will not post to the GL until these errors are cleared. Okay, and you will get something very similar for sales orders with the by virtue of the sales update program. So it's important that you understand that these error reports are there, and somebody needs to be responsible for reviewing them. Otherwise, you could be doing transactions that never actually get booked, okay, which is a problem. Okay, so can we go to the next? Okay, so now what I want to do, and I'm going to do this quickly, and I'm going to introduce our RapidReconciler product. And the reason that I'm doing this is because it includes a lot of reporting that directly address some of the things that we've talked about during this webinar. So DMAAIs in particular. So we mentioned this earlier, that it's our validated solution. It's a reconciliation tool. We cover perpetual inventory, goods in transit, received not vouchered. We reconcile those to the general ledger. Okay, can we advance that? Okay, so, and some of the benefits are using this is we have those integrity reports that are built in. So we will look at the model table, and you remember that slide with all those green boxes. So we take that model table and we will compare it to all those other DMAAIs and give you a listing and say, this DMAAI doesn't look like our model. We might want to review this. We have things for geo-class codes and to make sure that they are set up consistently through your system. Okay, and costing issues, right? So we can address a lot of this stuff right within the product itself. Okay, we do the back-end processing, right? So if you have work orders that are stuck, that are held up because there are no DMAAI set up, or sales orders, right? We will show that stuff to you. So all of that reporting is already pre-built. Okay, and then finally, it is a transaction-based inventory. Yeah, I'm just gonna skip over this because that's not really directly associated with the DMAAIs that I want to show you. Okay, so with that said, what I'm going to try to do here now is I'm going to try to bring my screen back up because I want to bring the application up and kind of show you what that does. All right. Let me see if I can just switch. Okay.
Oh, we can see it.
You can see it, Brittany?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Hey, I can actually do something now. All right, so this is kind of what RapidReconciler looks like. And again, just real quickly, here's inventory accounts, and it kind of does the reconciliation process for you. But what I really wanted to show you was over in the integrity report section, we address DMAAIs a lot because, again, as I mentioned before, it is a huge contributor to reconciling issues. So we have pre-built reports that are in here that give you your DMAAIs, how they're set up in a lot easier format to use than what JD Edwards provides. So as opposed to looking up DMAAIs one table at a time, here we can give you the whole list. We break it down by manufacturing, inventory, purchasing, sales. We can all export this to Excel and do a lot of analysis on DMAAIs just using the data that the tool provides. Okay, the model table concept, right? 4152, we pick the model. This is what we vet out to make sure that all these geo classes reference the right business unit, object, and subsidiary that we want. Once we get that, here is the listing that says, oh, guess what? We have a model. Here's another balance sheet DMAAI, and oh, by the way, it doesn't match our model. Our model says this is the account. This DMAAI says this is the account. We have mismatches all over the place. So we really need to review these DMAAIs and get them straightened out. Okay, so that's the type of information that I'm talking about, geo class codes. So these integrity reports that are built in actually help us prevent reconciling items, help us understand our DMAAI configuration, and definitely will assist you and prevent these headaches that you can have in the future. Okay, so I just wanted to take a few minutes to show you that. And with that, I would like to turn it back over to Brittany and we can start wrapping this up.
Perfect. I will share my screen. All right, thanks, Ed. Now I would like to cover up a few items and move on to our question and answer section of the webcast. Our webcast today is part of GSI's free ongoing educational webcast series on JD Edwards. We have 2 virtual workshops coming up in May, our hands-on orchestrator workshop, which is tomorrow, May 14th, and our UX1 workshop, which is on May 21st. And you can register for those workshops here. The links are there. Here we have our upcoming educational webcast schedule. We have an all-out security tips and tricks for JDE that is on May 20th. Check out our ERP Talk, which is our problem-solving forum where you can get your JD Edwards and other enterprise application questions answered, as well as contribute your answers to others' questions. Stay connected with us on social media. All of our handles are currently listed on this screen. You can see our most up-to-date posts on webcasts, events, industry insights, and so much more. GSI provides free educational resources for the JD Edwards community, including our weekly educational webcast, our monthly newsletter called the GSI Insider, our online resource center where you can get access to our on-demand webcasts, white papers, etc., and on-site and virtual workshops. If you would like to sign up for our weekly email reminders for upcoming webcasts, our monthly newsletter, or create an account to access our resource center, go to getgsi.com, go to resources and events on the main menu, select JD Edwards and the appropriate link on the right. While I see we've already had a couple of questions submitted, I would like to remind everyone that if you would still like to submit a question, you can do so using the questions panel in the GoToWebinar console window on the right side of your screen. If you minimized your console earlier, please click the left arrow to redisplay the questions panel. All right, and I'm just going to pull up our questions quickly.
And I have the questions up, Brittany, and if you don't mind, I will go through them.
Oh, perfect, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so first question is from George, and George says, have you ever had clients asking why AAI and DMAAI setup do not validate the account entered with the account master? And yes, George, I have. And you know what? I used to wonder that myself until, right, you realize that flex accounting kicks in, and when flex accounting kicks in, you cannot specify branch plants with, in subsidiaries within the DMAAIs. Now, the object account itself, that is a good question as to why they won't or why they don't do that when you enter the DMAAI. That I do not have an answer for, but I certainly understand why they don't do the business unit and the subsidiary, and it has to do with the flex accounting, and also the fact that if you leave the business unit blank in the DMAAI, it will default in the branch plant from the transaction. And that is quite a handy feature if you want to do inventory by branch plant. Okay, so that is a good question, and I've wondered that myself for a while. Okay, let's see. Can we please let us know about future cost update? Now, I didn't talk about future cost update, but I can tell you what I know about it. What that is future cost update. That's a batch program, and what you do is in your cost ledger, you set up different cost types. Right? Like the standard JD Edwards ones are, let's say 02 means the item is valued at average cost, and 07 means standard cost, and I believe 01 is last in, things of that nature. Okay, you can set up your own code. And let's say you have a code and you say, I want cost type 21, and you load all your items, with a cost type of 21. Well, the idea behind that would be that those costs that you're putting into your system are going to be the costs that you update to in the year 2021. Now, I just use code 21. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be the year number. But then there's a batch program called future cost update. And when you run that, you would specify, okay, the new cost for this item is now going to be what is currently sitting in cost 21. So this allows you to get all your future costs in place early so that when you run a cost update, it knows which cost to use. Okay. Okay, I see another question here about sharing the links for the workshop and the PowerPoint slide from today. And Brittany, I'll let you address that in a few minutes. But there's a couple other questions that I want to get to. All right. And one says, do you recommend using company 0 and asterisk? And personally, the answer is no. I don't like them. I would avoid them wherever possible, but I do understand that they have value. And they certainly can save you a ton of data entry. So I understand why they're there. For example, if you are familiar with the transfer order process, you know, and I'll call it the STOT process in JD Edwards, where I am going to transfer some materials from warehouse A to warehouse B, and warehouse B is far away from warehouse A. So I have to put it on a truck and I have to ship it somewhere. Okay, well, when I do that, JD Edwards creates a sales order and purchase order to account for that. So I ship everything off on the sales order, all my inventory magically goes away. Out of the inventory system, off the GL, and it needs to go into an in-transit account until it gets received on the other end. Well, I could have one in-transit account, and I typically do, that's for all items. So why wouldn't I say, I don't care what the GL class code is, I'll put in 4 asterisks. If I'm doing this type of transaction, here is my clearing account. I'll just throw all the dollars in there. That's a perfectly valid use of those wildcards, okay? But what I don't recommend them for is using them like for an IA transaction or something along those lines, where I have seen people set them up in order just to get errors off the screen when they do the transactions. So here you are in CRP, you're doing inventory transactions, you get those interactive errors I was showing you on the screen, and you can't have that. You don't. So the people who are doing the transactions typically don't really care what happens on the general ledger. They just want their transaction to process. Okay, so somebody will go in, they'll put in an asterisk in there and say, I don't really care about the GL side, I just want my transaction to work. That's not good, because we have to care about the GL side, right? The books have to be accurate. So we don't want to make it, we don't want to use what I call the Visine method and just putting asterisks everywhere. And I call it the Visine method because it takes the red out of the JD Edwards screen, so I don't see the red errors anymore. All right, so I've seen people do that, and that is really not the right application for that. Okay. Okay, does item location setup affect the DMAAIs? And the answer is no, not directly. I'm thinking what you might mean is that the location carries a geo class code, and the geo class code is used as a lookup for the DMAAI. So in that regard, kind of, but it is not a direct impact. So if I add another secondary location to an item, do I have to go do something in my DMAAIs? The answer is no, unless there's a brand new geo class code you haven't used before, right? If it's a new geo class, yes, you have to go set up DMAAIs. If it's just a new location with an existing geo class code, then no, you do not have to do that. Okay. Let's see. System. It looks like PowerPoint. Okay, Brittany, I think it's down to just the link for tomorrow's workshop and the PowerPoint slides from today. So I'll let you address those two.
Perfect, thanks. I just sent the link over for the orchestrator workshop, so you should receive that. And then also for the PowerPoints from today's webcast, you're going to be receiving an email with a link to our resource center on our website where you can access the recording from today's webcast as well as a copy of the presentation. So you will get that just right after this webcast, actually. And then also as a follow-up from today's webcast, we ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit. And then after the webcast, we'll do the drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card. Anyone that attended the entire webcast will be eligible, and then we'll notify the winner. And we just thank you again for attending the presentation and hope you have a great day.
Okay, and one last thing is if anybody is interested to learn more about RapidReconciler, just let us know and we can do something offline and give you some more information.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you guys.
Bye everyone.